From sea spiders as big as cats to colossal squids that look like sea monsters, the Arctic has a tendency of creating nightmare fuel monstrosities that are absolute behemoths in size. Unlike regular oceans, the Arctic is a treacherous, unchanging place where the cold is the only constant. The Arctic waters are freezing in temperature, and hardly any sunlight ever breakthroughs in the icy depths. This causes the water to not only have immense pressure, but also a noticeable lack of sunlight. Creatures in this corner of the world have learned to live in the darkness and survive on scraps. But these survival instincts come at a cost. Such extreme conditions have forced evolution to take on what we call polar gigantism. This phenomenon turns normal-sized sea creatures into incredibly large counterparts. Small things grow much larger in size, while large things only become even more massive in size. It almost seems counterintuitive for sea creatures to grow in size in a region where food and light is scarce. However, polar gigantism is not just an unpredictable side effect. It is a way for numerous species to survive the harsh conditions in the Arctic oceans. The best way to understand how and why polar gigantism works is by looking at the animals that are most affected by it. The colossal squid is an excellent example of how extreme and useful polar gigantism can be. Common misconception holds that the colossal squid is a result of deep-sea gigantism. However, that is not the case. The colossal squid comes from a family of glass squids that live closer to the surface of the water. But the ability to appear translucent is entirely useless in the darkness. This is where polar gigantism has transformed the colossal squid into an absolute tank. The colossal squid has a thicker body that moves slower but stores a lot more energy. Since there is no need for fast movements, the Arctic rewards slow progress. Even the metabolic rate of the colossal squid is much slower when compared to its surface counterparts. The Arctic water also holds a lot more oxygen compared to the upper levels, because the freezing temperatures trap more gases. This environmental factor has allowed the colossal squid to take on a bright red colour, which can absorb oxygen even from a simple bioluminescent creature. With a body that big, regulating oxygen can be difficult, but the colossal squid is perfectly designed to carry out this function as efficiently as possible. At this point, you might be wondering if the giant squid is also a victim of polar gigantism, and the answer to that is a little complex. While the giant squid has evolved primarily due to deep-sea gigantism, the colossal squid is a unique crossover between deep-sea and polar gigantism. The difference lies in the temperature of the water, and the cold conditions have caused the colossal squid to take on a weightier appearance. Even though it is not as long as the giant squid, the colossal squid is much bulkier and heavier, weighing over 1,000 pounds, a feature needed to store as much energy and oxygen as possible. But are other cases of polar gigantism this extreme? While the colossal squid is quite unique, it is not the only creature with a size problem. A normal sea spider found in warm water is only about 2 centimeters long, but their polar counterparts are massive in comparison. The sea spiders found in the Arctic Ocean are almost 2 feet long, making them efficient predators in the cold deep. Polar sea spiders have long, thin legs which help them breathe and absorb as much oxygen as possible. These spiders are known to feed on starfish, which is amusing to think about considering their smaller versions are incapable of hunting down something so large. Speaking of starfish, yes, polar gigantism has worked on these creatures as well, and the ones found in the icy waters are massive in size. These polar starfishes have 50 arms, thus not resembling a star at all, but a strange, alien creature. Evolution has caused the polar starfish to grow as many arms as possible, and they are known to feed on other starfishes as well. These usually small and cute sea animals have been transformed into an unthinkable entity simply because of a difference in temperature. From these few examples alone, we can start to see why polar gigantism is such an object of intrigue, but there is still more to be discovered. The extreme nature of polar gigantism has also produced one of the longest sea creatures in the world. The lion's mane jellyfish can grow to a whopping 120 feet in length. Even the blue whale is merely 90 feet long, making the jellyfish mind-numbingly long in size. The lion's mane jellyfish have long wispy arms that mimic the unruly hair of a lion. To set things in scale, the blue jellyfish that lives closer to the surface is merely 10 feet long, not even a third of the size of the lion's mane. After all this extreme evolution, can we really use the oxygen-rich water as conclusive evidence for the cause of polar gigantism? Well, there is much more to polar gigantism than just the high amounts of oxygen. The Arctic is a stable region which prefers sea creatures that have a slow metabolism. Unlike the life forms that dwell in warm water, there is no need for Arctic life to have fast movements or a constant need to hunt down prey. Even the reproduction and growth rate of animals in the Arctic Ocean is slow. They tend to live for several decades and they barely change over time. Life in the Arctic prefers stability that never offers anything too extreme. It may sound strange to view the Arctic as stable, but the conditions here never change. The temperature is always freezing. The water is always cold. This means that the sea creatures also have no need to strain themselves beyond their own biology. But can this same logic be applied to the polar bear or the emperor penguin? Can every life in Antarctica be a product of polar gigantism? To answer this question, we can refer to Bergmann's rule, a biological principle which states that warm-blooded animals grow larger in size because they lose heat slower. Polar bears need that extra insulation in order to protect themselves from the cold. Same goes for emperor penguins, who must survive the cold no matter what. These animals are not even truly colossal, but they are much larger in size because of a desperate need to survive. However, this also means that polar bears and other large red-blooded animals require more food, since they are constantly losing energy. Unlike the sea creatures of the Arctic, polar bears and emperor penguins must hunt food regularly, and if they were to grow any bigger, it would be difficult for the animal to survive. So, polar gigantism is not something that can be applied to other animals in the Arctic. It is something entirely unique to the sea creatures, who must grapple with different living conditions entirely. Even on a small scale, polar gigantism can be seen at work. The Antarctic copepods are simply the giant versions of plankton. The tropical versions of copepods can only be viewed through a microscope, but their polar counterparts are not only clearly visible, but also 10 times heavier in terms of weight. Now, on the opposite spectrum, we do have polar dwarfism as well. While extremely rare, some life forms in the Arctic oceans tend to be smaller than their warm water relatives. Some species of snail and ice fish have smaller bodies which allows them to grow faster. This leads to better survival, since these species can also reproduce faster and survive on small amounts of food for longer periods of time. When it comes to the Antarctic, life itself gives way to slow down time and evolution itself. The cold makes sure that life forms evolve very slowly and live for a very long time. Some of the species found in the Arctic have barely changed, and they are like monoliths of time. Here life feels like a relic. The animals found in the water offer a glimpse of a time that is long gone, but it remains preserved in the icy depths. In order for species with polar gigantism to survive, Antarctica has to remain a time capsule. But we live in a world that is always encroaching on the natural and the sublime. With polar ice caps melting and water temperatures constantly rising, there is no telling what the future holds for evolution. Polar giants rely on stability, but if we take away the freezing waters, the oxygen-rich atmosphere, and the darkness, then we risk losing these magnificent species. Change is an enemy to the Arctic, and we are already seeing irreversible damage to the ecosystem in the region. Polar sea spiders are already shrinking in size, and before we know it, even the likes of the colossal squid will become a distant memory. Even though we rarely get to see any of the creatures that are affected by polar gigantism, Their existence is a testament to the diversity of life on our planet. It is sad to think about potentially losing the wondrous ways in which the Arctic induces sea creatures to turn into gigantic monsters.